I had a couple questions for you. Just one, how many here likes cooking shows? You guys like cooking shows? We got some few people, and we got some people passionate about to clap. That's good. We got anybody that do you like baking shows? You like watching baking shows and cupcakes and all that stuff? Well, you guys can have that pansy stuff. I'm just kidding. My wife likes that stuff. I'm not too big into it. Actually, the three of us in our household, we really are into, watching competition shows like that, except for instead of Pretty Little Cupcakes, the show that we like to watch is one that makes bad to the bone blades. Okay, they're not bakers, they're bladesmiths. So they have these 5 competitors that come out, and they're like, okay, here we go. Here's the beginning. They're introducing these competitors. They're going to come out and they say, here, what we need you to do is we need you to make a blade. And it's like a knife, like this long, and then it needs to be this, and it needs to be curved like this, and it needs to have a tang that you can attach a handle to like that. And then you've got like 2 hours to make it, and go. And then here we go. And they start, boom, everybody's getting their stuff together, and they give them these particular metals that they have, and all this, they have to stack the metals together a lot of times, these little slivers, and they put them all together, and they tack weld it, and then they make it into like a shape that would be kind of like the stick of butter, okay? So it's like a shape, and then they call that shape a billet. Everybody say billet. So you're learning new stuff. So you got this billet, and they take this billet, and they stick it in what's called a forge. And they've got this forge, and it's like this box, and it's a very super, super hot flame that's inside of this forge. And they would put it in there, and as it would wait and kind of see until it turns to a certain color. And that color essentially it goes from like a bright orange almost to a white. It's so hot that there's people there that they've had contestants that they've had to go put them in the back to get IVs because they're dehydrating. It's so hot, they're just drinking water like crazy. This forge that they've got is just smoking hot right in front of them. So they put it in there and it turns white. They get it out. Now, once it's super, super hot, they're able to pull it out. They go and take it over to the anvil and boom, they start hammering on it. Boom, boom. They're just hammering and hammering and hammering. And eventually it starts to take a little bit of shape, but then it starts losing some of that white and that yellow color, and it starts to turn black. That means it's cooling off. And once it's cooling off, there's no hammering that's going to change the shape of it. So then they have to take it and they put it back in the forge, and then it gets hot again. Then they take it back out, and then you just can repeat this process over and over until it starts to take more and more shape. And then they reheat it, and they take it out again, and they hammer it again over and over again until it's got the shape that they want. And then it's time to quench it. So they take it out of the forge, and after it's been forge welded together, all the pieces all the different pieces that they put together are now forged into one piece. They take it out. It's got the shape. Here it is, a moment of truth. They stick it into this oil substance, and then big old flame shoots up, and then you can hear the oil is bubbling over, and it's boiling. And so then they take it out and they look at it. And they're like, okay, it's time for the first test. Everybody say the first test. The first test is they take a file. And they get this file and they run it across the blade. And if the file digs in at all, the blade's not been hardened enough, it wasn't hot enough, it wasn't heat treated right. Or if it just skates across, if the file just skates across, then it's good. But many times they'll look at it and they'll take that file and they're like, oh no, I don't have time. You have 30 minutes remaining, and then they're like, no. So they take it and they stick it back in the forge, and they got to get it really hot again. They got to hope, oh man, I hope this time it goes right. Get it hot, forge weld it together. Everything's getting ready. It's got to get hardened. And as soon as they're ready, they pull it out again, boom, stick it back in the oil. And they're like, man, this time I hope it's hot. I hope it's hardened. They pull it out. They'll put the file on, skates across. They are good to go. They're excited. Now it's time to start sharpening it. It's time to kind of get the shape in it on the sanding, and they're just getting it all just right. Then they move on. If they do get a chance to move on, they move on to the next round, which is going to then start testing the strength of the blade. Oh my goodness, this is just It's honestly, it feels idiotic because I never could imagine taking like a knife, like a nice big knife, and hitting it on like metal objects or stone objects, because that's not what a knife is meant for. It's just boom. So they'll take it and they'll just test it by hitting these crazy hard objects just to see if they had done the heat treat right. Because if you didn't do the heat treat just right, if you didn't do it just right, just the right temperature, keep it in there long enough, it's going to break in half. And you hate to see it because you're one of your favorite contestants, one of the ones, because right at the beginning of the show, my whole family picks one that we feel like, we really want to win, And then sure enough, we're just on the edge of our seat because they're just hitting this stupid object. I'm like, why are you doing this? And it, boom, boom. And on like the third one, it's goo, gah, and the blade just shatters in half. And then they'll bring it over. The host or something will come over and he's like, look, you can see here the grains, it didn't get hot enough. You didn't heat treat this quite right. It wasn't ready. That's why it broke in half. And they're like, oh, no, come on. So they're out. And then you get the next guy, if they get to move on, then the next one is they'll see after they've done all that and beat the blade up and did it hold its edge properly. Now they see if it's sharp enough. So they'll take it over to the next little area and they'll cut it against stuff to see if it's still really razor sharp. And if you pass that, then you can be the one to take home $10,000 and be the champion. Anybody else here want to take home some 10 grand after dealing with a little bit of heat? That sounds like fun, right? I can do that. Not really. I think I'd be out the first round. Today, I want to preach to you on a message that I'm calling Forged Faith. Everybody say Forged Faith. I want us to pray together. Jesus, thank you for talking to us during worship and being with us as we began to just pour out on you. You poured out on us. And I ask you today to help this word to come forth in a way that everybody could understand, but more than that, it could transform us from the inside out. I ask God that there be a spirit of expectation in the room. I'd ask God that you would help us to lift off any burden that would be holding us down. Are you praying, church? Any burden that would hold us down. And I'm asking you, God, that you would let there be an expectation for the faith that you plan to pour out on your people here in this service. In Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said amen. I would propose this about our faith journey, that we can know some verses up here and we can memorize some songs and we can attend some services and being a part of some really great things. But there comes a moment in your life that it isn't just about what you know. It's about, can we apply what we know? Someone said knowledge is power. Well, that is absolutely false. Applied knowledge is power. There are times in all of our lives where there's some things that offer us an opportunity for a test to see, have we really retained the information? Pastor, you've been preaching. Bishop, you've been preaching. Y'all been teaching. Have you really retained what's being taught? Or are we kind of just in here hearing it and then letting it go in one ear and out of the other? Is it what you've been studying, what you've been saying, what you've been singing, what you've been declaring? Is it really alive in your life? Also, I want to talk to you today about, forged faith, because forged faith is the kind of faith that can be tested. Because some of you, you really should know that God doesn't allow tests into your life that set you up to fail. It's not God's design. I've taken some of those tests in school. Tests that were designed to make you to fail, and they're like trick questions and whatnot. And I just want to tell the teachers that is evil in the sight of the Lord. I don't know. We need to pray for them folks, because I promise you that is not good. Like, it's like A or B. I mean, A kind of is right and B's kind of right too. And then they're kind of like, just pick the one you feel like is best. And I'm like, I don't want to choose the one I feel like is best. I want to choose the right one. Y'all, I was the last one. I'm telling you, people had already been in the gym playing basketball for a while. I'm still in there taking the test. Why? Because I'm like, I'm not going to just get this maybe right. I'm going to stay here till every one of these is exactly right. That's my personality. Like, they're like, no, just choose what you feel like is best. No, I need to know it is right. But God, He doesn't allow tests in your life to set you up to fail. For those taking notes, temptation sets you up for failure. Tests set you up for freedom. God does not tempt, He only tests. God will allow tests into your life to see the strength of your faith. There's the file test on your life, and he says, hey, listen, I want you to come in here, and I want you to go through this life, and I want to be able to do this file test to make sure that you're strong enough. Before you get out there and something breaks you in half, I want to be sure that you're strong enough, because life is going to present some things to you that's going to hit you against some very, very hard objects. But if you'll trust me, I'm going to do this file test on you. I'm going to give you some abrasion. I'm going to allow some stuff come into your life. And if you need, we might have to go back into the forge a little bit. But trust me, it's much better than breaking. There's some guys in the Bible that go through a test, and I want to show you 4 things about them that I think is going to help you to know what our faith should do and can do in the middle of a test. In the book of Daniel, chapter 3, we've been talking about Daniel over the last few months, on and off, and I felt like it'd be good to revisit that today. There's a story that may be familiar to you if you've been around church, and that's okay if you've heard it many times, because there's most likely somebody in this room today that this will be the first time that they've heard this story. And it's truly fascinating. And it talks about these 3 boys that have been taken into captivity in the Old Testament and placed in Babylon. And there's this guy named King Nebuchadnezzar, really cool name. And at this point, he is an evil, evil king. He doesn't know God. He doesn't serve God. He's like, I'm going to make this statue, this golden statue. And so it says here in Daniel chapter 3, verse number 6, then a herald shouted out. Okay, that's not Uncle Harold there. That's just a herald. I know Uncle Harold shouts out a lot at Thanksgiving. Then a herald shouted out, people of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and other musical instruments, bow to the ground and worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Continue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Woo! That's pretty harsh. That's pretty extreme, right? But it's what's going to happen if they don't bow. And it may not seem like a big deal, because it may seem like, you know what, God knows your heart, okay? God knows your heart. So if you just go over there and you just, you bow, but you're staying in your heart, God will understand. Right? Doesn't it feel like that? I know, don't even act like that. I said, that's crazy. I would never do that. That's our whole culture these days. God knows your heart. You can do something different. You can look different, act different, smell different, doesn't matter. But God knows your heart. But it was problematic because there was 3 Hebrew boys. And by boys, that's what, they talk about the 3 Hebrew children. The scripture refers to that. By boys here, they're probably more like early 20s is where they're at, according to what we can find in scripture. And they were Jewish, and they had been brought into Babylon through captivity, and they were working for the king. And these 3 Hebrew boys had the conviction of character, and they had a love for God that would not allow them to bow. And they find themselves in a problematic state because the command was clear, the edict was plain, but they would not bow. Here's what I would propose to you today. A forged faith may have to walk through the fire. If you want to have forged faith that can withstand the test, you may have to walk through some fire in this life. And it's kind of countercultural to some Christianity that we would hear about or know about in today's world. The Christianity that would like to paint the picture that it's all blue skies and blessings. But if you want faith that has been forged, you have to learn how to walk through the fire. Let me say it this way for your notes. A faith that can't be tested is a faith that can't be trusted. A faith that can't be tested is a faith that can't be trusted. Here's what the king's responds here in verse number 12. I'm going to walk you through this. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold statue that you have set up. Oh, these guys, they have nothing but good intentions in heart, I'm sure, by tattletaling like this. I'm sure they're very good people. Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage. Man, you know, if the king flies into a rage, you better watch out. Like, he needs some therapy probably. And he ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. And when they brought them in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or worship the gold statue that I've set up? So here we go. Now that we've set the stage, let's pull out a few things that we can learn from this story here today. So if you want to have forged faith, for your notes, you're going to have to face opposition. Everybody say face opposition. Face opposition. You have to be ready for it. Y'all, this is a ramp today because we're going to take off here in a little bit. So y'all just kind of go ahead and get ready because, I'm just setting the stage. We're going to have some fun in a few minutes. Y'all better be ready to stand up and do some backflips. But here we are. If y'all really did do some backflips, I promise you I might go on to heaven if I sing that happen. I'm God, I'm going. I don't know what just happened in here. You have to be ready for opposition. So you say, I have faith. I know that faith is the key to unlocking miracles in my life. I know that it's impossible to please God without faith. I know that faith is the currency of heaven. And you say, I'm ready for that kind of faith. I realize how essential faith is to my walk. And I really want to grow in my faith. And I want to stir my faith. But you've got to know, if you want faith, you're going to have to face opposition in your life. And you could call it opposition. You could call it a challenge. You could call it a storm. You could call whatever word you want to put in there, but you're going to face some adversity in your life. I'm trying to warn you. And what I found about opposition in my own life and observing the life of others that I've pastored is that opposition can give you a very narrow mind. Everybody say narrow mind. Here's what I mean by that. When you're facing opposition, you begin to see things in a very small way, very narrow. And all of a sudden, the world is against you. And God is no longer for you. I want you to take, for example, Elijah, we talked about not too long back. Elijah, one of the greatest men in the Bible, one of the greatest prophets to ever live. In the Old Testament, he was alive and well. And he came before God one day and he says, I'm the only one left serving you, God. And they all want to kill me. Well, neither of those statements are true. Because he wasn't the only one serving God. There was plenty of people serving God at that point. And there was only one person that wanted to kill him. But he was facing opposition. And he wanted God to know how he felt, because when we get this opposition, it feels like everybody's against you. It feels like God's abandoned you. It feels like God's not for you. It feels like God has forgotten about you. And it can make you think you're the only person going through this. And no one else feels how you feel. No one knows the trouble I've been in. I've been around long enough to watch and see how as soon as opposition starts to come against many people, all of a sudden it begins to narrow in, and all they can think about is their trouble, their problem, and no one else could ever possibly understand. That's opposition. We've often had a skewed perspective, thinking that opposition is a sign that maybe God's not with us. We're not moving in the right direction. Something's wrong. There's some opposition there. What, God, are you punishing me? But you have to learn that opposition is actually just an opportunity. See, the Bible says that God doesn't send evil or temptation into your life, but he will use what was sent into your life. See, the enemy meant for evil, but God means it for good. What the enemy means to eliminate you, God will use to elevate you. What the enemy means as a stumbling block, God will use as a stepping stone. When the enemy means to tear you down, God will use it to test you. When the enemy tries to destroy you, God is building you up. When the enemy tries to remind you of your past, God is reminding you of your future. When the enemy tries to put you under his foot, God says, I will lift you up. When the enemy tries to ruin you, God is building you up. It's the testing of our faith that produces perseverance. It's the testing of our faith that produces perseverance in our life. Can I say it this way? It's an opportunity for God to say, do you have the goods? Do you have the goods? I know it up here. I know it. I sing it out here. I read about it in here. But the question is, do I have it in here? Because the storms will come. And I've watched it way too many times, God's precious people. They had it everywhere else but in here. They sang about it, worshiped about it, talked about it, sang about it. But a storm came. And because they weren't anchored into a relationship that was deeper than just the shallow areas that we come and just hear about on Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights sometimes, but it was a walk with God that they experienced on a day-to-day basis. If you're not anchored in that, it will blow you away. The fire of opposition either burns you up or you come out as gold. And so you have to be able to see it for what it is. It's not just some, terrible situation that you're the only one that's having to deal with. You'll find yourself bemoaning opposition if you're not careful, and you're saying, I'm going to end up saying, basically, God, I'm giving up. Everything's too hard all the time. Everything's too difficult all the time. And the Bible's saying, I've seen this to be the issue too often, where someone's saying, God, I don't know, am I supposed to thank God for this, what I'm going through? Because this is really hard, and I don't like what I'm going through. I don't like this. This is really hard. And you're saying I'm supposed to be thankful for this? Is that what you're saying? No, the Bible says to be thankful in all things, not for all things. You're not supposed to be thankful for what's happening that's going on around you, what's happening that's trying to tear your family apart. You're supposed to be thankful in the process. I'm not afraid of saying, God, I'm thankful for what you're trying to teach me in the process, but I'm certainly not thankful for the trial. And I want you to see that these three Hebrew boys, they responded whenever the king brought them in. And this is what they said here. Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you." Verse 17, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. Well, I really like this because at the end, they're just like, you know what? You ain't got nothing on us, your majesty. That's my favorite. It's like, they just like letting them know how it is. Yeah, you ain't got nothing, but your majesty, we really want to show some respect there. They said, okay, we don't feel the need. We have no need to defend ourselves in this matter because the God we serve is able. So number 2, forged faith will increase confidence. Everybody say increase confidence. Confidence in what? Confidence in God. See, their confidence wasn't in them. It was in the God that they served that was able. And so our confidence can't be in our ability. Their confidence wasn't in their ability to withstand heat. Their confidence was in their ability to break loose of whatever ropes was put on them physically. They knew that they weren't superhuman. They knew that they were going to have some struggles. They had confidence in a God that can do more than ever that they thought could be done. Some of you need to be reminded of this, that you serve a God that is able. Some of y'all, that's the one line you needed to hear when you came in today was that my God is able. Maybe you grew up in a religious tradition where God is kind of afar off and he's kind of out there somewhere and he kind of did some things in the past and then he kind of watches from a distance as the earth spins today. But I just need you to know that this God we serve is able. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Just as he was able to deliver Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he's able to deliver you today. He's able to heal your marriage. He's able to heal your disease. He's able to bring your child back from the brink of disaster. He's able to open the door of your career. He's able to provide. Today you need to remember that our God is able. If you're going to have forged faith, There's something inside of you that has to say, I know that he's able. And when you look around and all the flames of frustration are there, and when the embers of your trial are still burning, and the enemy presents you with the ashes of your past, you've got to remember that God is able. He's not always on time the way you need it or the way you want it. He's not always coming in the way that you like or when you want him to. You're not always there in the season that you hope for or in the package, the beautiful package that you hope for. But he will show up. He will do it the way it needs to be done. He'll do it the way that always is perfect in his eyes. He's able to do exceedingly. He's able to do abundantly above all that you could ask or think. He's able. And some of us, we get stuck at this point because it's daunting when we get out there and the thing, whatever that thing is wanting us to bow. Fear wants us to bow to it. Divorce wants us to bow to it. Anxiety wants us to bow. Culture wants us to bow. And we get before the thing and we allow the fear to grip our heart. And it paralyzes us. We find ourselves saying, I felt like I was strong until you get faced with the thing. But if we can fix our eyes on Jesus, we'll end up just like the 3 Hebrew boys, and instead of bowing, they'll say, I don't need to worry about this. I don't need to get uptight about this. I don't need to lose sleep about this because I serve a God that is able. I don't need to fear. I don't have to worry. I don't have to complain. I don't have to tell everybody around. I don't have to make a Facebook post about it. I just have to know that God's able. That was easy to clap to, and that's always good. It's fun to talk about God's able. It's good to talk about God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Man, I love that stuff, and it's fun to celebrate. But I want to take it one step further. You want to go with me? We're going to look at verse number 18. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the golden statue that you set up. But even if he doesn't. Now, this is what I came to preach about today, so I hope you're ready. See, I don't want you to just have a God is able kind of faith. I want you to have a faith that says, but even if he doesn't. I want you to have the kind of faith that says, whether or not he gets us out of this financial mess I'm in, I know he's still able. Whether or not he heals my body, I'm still going to worship him. Whether or not he brings me financial breakthrough, I'm going to still be faithful. Whether or not he does exactly what I hope for, I'm still going to worship him. He's never let me down, and he never will. Even if he never does another thing for me, Calvary was enough. Nails in his hands were enough. Stripes on his back were enough. An empty tomb was enough. If he never does another thing for me, he's already done enough. Even if he doesn't. Listen, church, there's nothing more powerful than even if he doesn't kind of faith. There's nothing more powerful than even if he doesn't kind of faith. We can believe it. God, you're going to do it. God, you're going to take care of it. But there's something unconditional about I'm going to worship him because of what I already know he's done. Oh, I'm going to worship him because if he hadn't come out of that tomb, I couldn't be alive. I don't have a future in heaven. I don't have a future in him. If he hadn't taken the stripes, I wouldn't be able to be healed. If he hadn't had those nail-scarred hands. And here's the deal. You won't step into that kind of faith if you have transactional faith. Everybody say transactional faith. Hyphen, they were here for prayer yesterday, and I gave them a preview of this. I went and preached this thing up there in the prayer room to them yesterday, and we had a shout down, and I took an offering and everything. I didn't really. Here's what I mean by transactional faith. It is easy to have a my God is able faith when God is coming through in the way that you want, in the time that you wanted him to. It's easy to clap on the other side of your miracle. It's easy to praise while you're in the promised land. It's easy to worship when the waves have subsided. It's easy to have those moments, but what about when you're about to be tied up, and they're tying you up and they're bringing you closer and closer to the fire, and they're bringing you closer and closer to the heat? What about in those moments? Is it easy to worship then? See, if it's transactional, that means, God, I'm worshiping you. I want you to hear it, because this is a revelation for this church here today that you must get. God, I'll worship you and I'll serve you and I'll have faith in you if you do for me what I'm asking for you to do. Oh God, I'll never do that. I don't know. Those other guys would probably, but I would never do that. I think we all have. I've seen too many people have their faith derailed in these moments because they had transactional relationship with God, and they thought that because of their church attendance that they were depositing in a heavenly account. They thought because of their Bible reading they were making some deposits in heaven. And they thought that maybe at some day they can make a withdrawal on that. And when they went to make their withdrawal, I'm preaching to you. When they went to make their withdrawal, they didn't get back what they thought they would get back. And they didn't get it back the way they thought it would come back. And they didn't get back as much as they thought they would get back. God, I've been depositing in my prayer. I've been reading my Bible. Deposit. I've been coming to church. Deposit. The preacher asked us to do this and this for 50 days. Deposit. I've been depositing, God. And all of a sudden it's time and you say, God, I need something. And if he doesn't give you back what you thought you put in, I'm out. I don't know, God. I don't know. I thought you were a man of your word. Hear me. God, I'm really not giving all this to you. I need you to hold on to it in my heavenly savings account, because I never know when I'm going to need it back. If you're loving God and you're serving God in a pure way, if I'm loving God and serving God in a pure way, I'm giving to God of everything we just talked about. I'm giving to God in my prayer. I'm giving to God in my giving. I'm giving to God in my Bible time. And I'm giving to God by coming to service. I'm giving it to him. But too many of us use it as a savings account. I'm giving it to God, but I'm doing all this knowing that hopefully someday I'll get something back. God, I'm not giving it to you. I'm giving it to you. I'm depositing it into that account that hopefully one day you're going to pour it back down onto me from the windows of heaven. I don't know how to say it any better. That's weak faith. That's transactional faith. And if your faith is transactional, whenever opposition comes, you're going to have a hard time standing. But if your faith is transformational, where it has done something on the inside of you, when you can say, God, whether you do something for me or not, I'm still going to serve you. Whether you do something for me or not, whether you pour down from heaven or not, I'm still going to serve you. I love to have the blessing. I love to be blessed by you if you want to do so, if you see fit, but whether or not. Listen, transformational faith is the kind of faith that understands the character of God. The character of God is that he is good, is that he's loving, that he's all-knowing, that he knows the beginning from the end. And that's why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, we knew that God was able to be believed and he was going to save us from this fiery furnace. But even if he didn't, we understood his character. We understood that he must be up to something bigger in the earth. We understood that he could see the beginning from the end, that he was outside of time. And because I understand his character, that means if he doesn't do what I've asked him to do, he's got a good reason for it. And his reason is as high above the heaven or the earth as heaven is the earth. So what we've got to see is God is saying, I've got a good reason for whatever it is I'm trying to hold from you. Because if I'm holding it back, just trust me, I'm waiting for the right time. And boy, when the right time hits, you're going to be blown away. Your faith is going to explode. Even if he didn't do it, we're going to keep worshiping him. We're going to keep serving him. We're going to keep loving. We're going to keep having faith. We're going to keep attending. We're going to keep doing the day by day because it was transformational, not transactional. Let's go to verse number 19. Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. That's another fun picture. I like that one. I want to see some. Y'all give me some distorted rage faces and go. 3 people decided to do it. Jesus, you've seen it. Lack of submission in this room is... that was a test. That was a test that set you up to fail, and I should be rebuked. So they got thrown into the fire. Number 1, forged faith will face opposition. Number 2, forged faith will increase confidence, but forged faith will also, number 3, remain faithful. Everybody say faithful. I don't know about you, but but reading this text, I was thinking for real, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and like you couldn't just be like in this moment, you're about to be thrown in the fire, you're getting closer and closer. Really though, you couldn't be just like, oh, just kidding. We're just messing with you, Nebuchadnezzar. We were testing you to see how you were going to react. I mean, like the 3 of them, they had to be looking at each other at some point and just being like, giving at least the eyes, like, man, are you sure we're going to do this? But I'm going to stop for a second and I'm going to say something. I hope you hear me. I believe they were stronger because they were together. That's not my message, but I think you need to hear it. I really don't know if they would have withstood the temptation to just bow if it was just one of them. I don't know that they would have, even just 2 of them, but they had this 3-fold cord that wasn't easily broken. They had people that were gathered together in one place. And God says, I'm there with them. He says, I'm going to take care of you, but you need each other. But they remained faithful. So they remained faithful, and the Bible goes on to tell us a miracle. Here we are, verse number 25. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, I see 4 men unbound walking around in the fire, unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god. This is either what theologians call a theophany, which is like a temporary visual representation of God, or it's an angel from heaven. Either way, the Lord was with them in the fire. This is fun to preach right here. Verse 27b, they saw that the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, and the clothing was not scorched, and they didn't even smell of smoke. Boy, that's exciting to preach about. Boy, there's a lot of sermons I've heard, and I love preaching that point. It's fun. But here's what I want you to see. This is the point of forged faith. You ready for the point? I'm coming at all right here. This is it. This is the culmination. Verse number 28, then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted him. So here it is. Forged faith, your last point, will always exalt Jesus. Do you see it? The point of the story wasn't that they didn't come out smelling like smoke. That's fun to preach and everybody will get on their feet for that. The point wasn't that they didn't have burn marks on them. The point wasn't that the ropes that had them tied up were burned off in the flames. At the beginning of the chapter, Nebuchadnezzar put up a statue. He said, all these other people need to worship this God. But that the forged faith of these Hebrew boys had hardened in the flames. And 30 verse later, verse 28, praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There is no other God who can rescue like this. Let me tell you, that's the point. It's not that just God is just testing your faith. God is testing our faith, and that's great, but that's not the point. It's that through your faith, Jesus is exalted. It's through your trial that you come out better, and that somehow Jesus is exalted. It's why we walk through hell in this life. And then people will say, I don't know how you walk through that cancer with joy in your heart and a smile on your face. That's forged faith. I don't know how you walk through that situation with your child, but you're still walking with Jesus, and somehow you're making it through that mess that you're in. That's forged faith. Somebody's saying, I want what you've got because I'm struggling on my own. When they look at you in your trial, they see the Lord walking with you in the fire. If you've got forged faith in this room, that's the point of it all. That Jesus can show up with you in the depths of your trial, in the roughest part of your situation, and you don't have to be have frowns on your face. You don't have to be in depression. You don't have to feel loneliness. You just got to know, I got Jesus with me, and when Jesus is with me, let him be exalted. And when he's exalted, others around will begin to see that's the only God who can save. That's the only one who can bring somebody through. I've got to have what they have. Nobody else can deliver. Nobody else can redeem. Nobody else can heal but Jesus. That's what they need to see. As everybody would stand, please. Remember, I want you to remember the burning bush. You guys remember that? The story of the burning bush with Moses. The fire was burning, but the bush was not consumed. I felt the Lord speak to me yesterday in this very room as I was beginning to pray, to prophesy to this room, that you're in the fire, but you will not be consumed. You're in the fire. It feels like it's hot. Feels like it's overwhelming. It feels like you can't take another minute of it. I've come to tell you today that you will not be consumed. If you have Jesus with you, everything's going to be okay. It feels impossible. It feels like there's no way out. But God says, if I'm with you, I'm going to take care of you. If I'm with you, I'll burn off the things that are holding you back. But don't you worry. In the end, he's going to get the glory. I'd ask you to close your eyes, please. More than a few of you recently, you feel like you've been in the fire. Some of you have walked through the fire this very week. You feel like the flames are nipping at your feet. Hard to survive, it feels at times. I want you to raise your hand if you feel like you've been in the fire. You got hands all over the room. Put your hands down. Some of you, you're trying to remember what it was like to not be in the fire. You've been in it so long, you don't even know what it's like to be out of it hardly anymore. I want you to raise your hand. You just says, man, I feel like I've just been in it. I feel like I'm just living in it. Put your hands down. Some of you in here, you need to be honest with God enough today to say, my faith isn't as strong as it needs to be. I'm worried, God, that I'm going to break. God, my faith has been struggling some, and I'm not sure I can handle another test right now. If you can say, that's me, Pastor, I want you to raise your hand. You say, oh, God, I'm worried about my faith. My faith has been struggling. Get hands all over the room. You can put your hands down. For those saying, God, I see the point. I'm ready for my test to exalt you. I'm ready, God, to get outside of just this narrow mind that I've maybe been in lately, but I'm ready for my test to exalt you. I'm ready for my faith, a faith that declares the power of God to those around me. Raise your hand. You say, I want that kind of faith. If you raised your hand at all today, I want you to please begin to make your way to this altar.